Hafidades and Manana Sidzuas, many of God's blessings to all of you here, and happy Thanksgiving. The Committee on the Guam Buildup would like to call this informational briefing to order, and it is now 8:36 in the morning, Monday, November 25th, 2019. And for the record, and in accordance with 5 GCA Chapter 8, subsection 8107, public hearing notices were sent on Monday, November 18th, adhering to the 5-day notice, and a second public notice was on Thursday, November 21st, 2019, and November 22nd, adhering to the 48-hour notice. In addition, the hearing was noticed on the legislature's website, www.guamlegislature.com. Written testimonies, ladies and gentlemen, may be submitted by emailing speaker@guamlegislature.org, or you may hand deliver any of your comments to our office here at the Guam Congress Building, 163 Chalan Santo Papa, Hagatnya, Guam. I'd like to recognize my colleagues here with me this morning. On my left, Senator Jose Pito Terlahi. To my right, Minority Leader Senator Will Castro, and to his right, Senator Jim Moylan. Sidzus Masi for being with us this morning. Today, ladies and gentlemen, and to the listening audience here on Guam, begins a two-part informational briefing on the Guam buildup. On November 6, 2019, Governor Lou Leon Guerrero and Rear Admiral John Menoni convened the Civil Military Coordinating Council, which is the CMCC. And since the inception in 2010, the recent November meetings marked the 6th annual convention of the CMCC. Representatives from the government of Guam, Joint Region Marianas, and local and U.S. federal agencies also were in attendance. As the chairwoman on the Committee on the Guam Buildup, over the last couple of months, we have held meetings with both Government of Guam stakeholders as well as our federal partners to better understand the impact of the buildup, understanding our shortcomings and identifying solutions. The recent CMCC meeting, as outlined in the charter, served as a venue for GovGuam agencies to share with the Department of Defense recommendations to revise the buildup's current and future construction tempo, as this directly influence workforce population levels and mitigation strategies that impact Guam's environment, social culture, and economic well-being. This morning, we will hear from the Government of Guam agencies, led by the Guam Buildup Office Executive Director, Ms. Vera Tapasnia, as well as the Governor's Chief Policy Advisor on Military and Regional Affairs, former Senator Ms. Carlotta Leon Guerrero. And joining them on the panel today are representatives from the Guam Environmental Agency, the State Historic Preservation Officer, the Department of Labor, the Department of Public Works, the Department of Public Health and Social Services, the Port Authority of Guam, the Guam Water Works, the Guam Power Authority, the Department of Land Management, Bureau of Statistics and Plants, and the Department of Agriculture. And to my colleagues here today, included in your packets are the presentation that is provided, as well as the sheet for all your questions. I want to share, ladies and gentlemen, given the vast array of topics that we will be covering, and the need for subject matter experts that would need to provide technical answers, I am asking that you write down all of your questions, and our committee staff can then complete them, compile them, and we'll send them to the relevant agencies so you can have your questions answered in writing. The questions, once answered, will also be posted on the Guam Legislature's Buildup database for those in our community to access as well. I also want to note for the record to those of you watching at home, you can also submit your questions to our office email, which is speaker@guamlegislature.org. guamlegislature.org, and I will be able to facilitate the process to get you the answers you seek. And when sending your questions, kindly include your name and the relevant agency that you would like to post your question to. Those of you who would like to submit questions but do not have access to email, you can also stop by our office or submit them by mail to the Office of the Speaker, 163 West Chalan Santo Papa, Hagatnya, Guam, 96910. Once answered, your questions will be posted on our Guam's Build-Up database. Other than in the interest of time, given the vast array of topics that will be covered today, another reason that I'm asking that these questions be provided in writing is because most of your questions, I believe, has another side to it. And I want to give the Department of Defense the opportunity to chime in on these questions so that we are all on the same page. And joining me this morning also, my Vice Chair on the Guam Build-Up, Senator Kelly Marsh Taitsno, Manana Sizus. Thank you for being here. And I'd like to thank all of you from the agencies who are here this morning. And without further ado, I would like to ask Ms. Vera Taposma if you can introduce the panel we have today and begin your opening remarks. Also, Senator Leon Guerrero, please join us. I see a lot of agency heads here, and we'll work with Ms. Taposma's opening statement first. Manana Sizus, Ms. Vera. For the record, when you come up, please state your name, the agency you're from, and then we can start the presentation. Okay?
Hi, good morning, Speaker, Vice Speaker on Military Affairs, Senator Kelly Marsh, and members of the 35th Guam Legislature. I would like to refer to my colleagues so that they can introduce themselves individually before I provide opening remarks. That's okay? Yeah, go ahead.
You're more than welcome, agency heads, to sit at the table, and those who can sit, and then what we'll do is we'll just trade off if that's okay. Dave? Uncle Jesse?
All right, good morning. Patrick Lujan, State Historic Preservation Officer.
Jesse Garcia, Department of Public Works Deputy Director.
Good morning, Roy Bishop, Port Authority at Guam.
Good morning, Linda Umpinko DeNorsi from the Department of Public Health and Social Services, the Director.
Good morning, Walter Leon Guerrero, Guam EPA.
Michelle Lastimosa, Guam EPA.
David Diaz.
Dave Della Sola, Guam Department of Labor.
You can grab a chair for him.
And Greg Massey, my administrator for ALPCD.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hafa and good morning, Honorable Speaker Muña Barnes, and Vice Chair on Military Affairs, Senator Kelly Marsh, and members of the 35th Guam Legislature. Thank you for this opportunity to provide updates on the military buildup. My name is Vera Taposma. I'm the Executive Director for the Guam Military Buildup Office. Today, my colleagues and I will be presenting as a team, having worked together for the last several months on military buildup issues and opportunities. The Military Buildup Office, Office of the Governor, as you may know, serves as the Government of Guam's central repository for all buildup activity related to the Marine relocation to Guam. We expend considerable time, energy, and resources related to the Marine relocation and the Department of Defense's rebalance to the Pacific Program or the Distributive Laydown Plan, which entails actions other than the U.S. Marine Corps' relocation to Guam. To date, the Guam Buildup Office has managed approximately $50 million in logistical support, mitigation studies, as well as supported the award of over $300 million in off-base infrastructure projects to include defense access roads, the cultural repository, water wastewater treatment plant upgrades, and Port Authority master plan. Since appointed, the priority for the administration is to continue to ensure that the buildup is responsive and responsible to the needs of the people of Guam. Together with the Senior Advisor on Military and Regional Affairs, former Senator Carlotta Leon Guerrero, and the team here today, we have reviewed previous strategies undertaken to mitigate the effects of the buildup, to include reviewing programmatic agreements, reviewing mitigation studies, planning and execution of initiatives relative to these studies, and review of the 4 pillars under the One Guam Initiative. Through the One Guam Initiative, we are in discussions regarding net negative, which provides an opportunity for our governor to make requests for the return of excess lands. This request is currently being reviewed at the highest levels of the Department of Defense, and our local team is actively engaged in those discussions. Furthermore, I can assure you today that our team is actively engaged and communicating with the Department of Defense almost on a daily basis, covering an array of topics from environmental and cultural historic preservation and stewardship to adopting community and defense initiatives that serve all of the people of Guam. Today, however, we will share with you our present-day activities, the challenges, and the manpower needs to ensure we have the resources to deal with the expected increase in military construction on the island. What we know today is that the cost of the buildup remains at $8.7 billion and a total of 5,000 Marines relocating to Guam, with 3,300 of those Marines on a rotational basis. The construction schedule to date remains on track, with peak construction activity beginning in 2021. Understanding the magnitude of the peak years for construction, our team is aggressively pursuing and working to identify and secure additional funding for manpower and technological advances needed to successfully address the increased workload. As you may be aware, and as mentioned by the speaker, the Civil Military Coordinating Council, or more commonly known as CMCC, convened earlier this month between the Government of Guam and Department of Defense leaders. This meeting, led by Governor Leon Guerrero and Rear Admiral Manoni, provided an opportunity to focus discussions on the Government of Guam challenges as we continue to provide day-to-day service to our people, the Department of Defense, and to prepare for peak construction in 2021. The 2015 Guam CNMI Supplemental Environmental Impact Study notes a total of 187 personnel needed, with the cost of approximately $10 million to support our Government of Guam agencies for the peak years alone. To address the accuracy of these numbers, Governor Leon Guerrero and Rear Admiral Manoni called for sub-working groups to validate these numbers and to provide real-time data based on current and projected local and DoD needs. We are also looking at funding pathways to address this, as well as possible policy changes to support our local agencies. In all of the work, past and present, we recognize how dynamic yet challenging the buildup is, and we can assure you again that our priority is ensuring the quality of life and level of service we provide to the people of Guam on a day-to-day basis is not impacted. In closing, we look to you, our leaders here in the 35th Guam Legislature, in helping us to find those pathways that will assist our Government of Guam agencies and our team to ensure again that the people of Guam have a bright and prosperous future. And I would now like to defer to my esteemed colleagues here with me and subject matter experts who will provide an overview of activities in each of their respective agencies. Again, thank you so much for this time and this opportunity.
Sitsu Ismasi, and before we continue, our Committee on Rules Chair is also present with us this morning. Thank you, Senator Regine Biscoli, for joining us. Cito Masi. Senator Carlotta, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and good morning to all of your colleagues. I would just take a little bit of time to kind of pull apart a little bit of something with more details of what Vera was talking about, and that is the different pathways that we are looking at to get funding for the 187 employees that will be needed from 2021 to 2028. We are beginning to move that number up through the CMCC. The CMCC is going to make us determine that that is something that cannot be paid for with the general fund. The governor feels that this is a federal expense, that all of the justification for these employees will be because of their extra workload working on military federal projects. So she feels that's a federal expense. So we wanted to bring this up to you now because we know we're going to be going into budgets very shortly, very soon, and there's going to be this separate effort that we are working with our agencies to come up with what that number is, but there's going to have to be some determination because of the process that we're in, that the government of Guam cannot pay that. So I just bring that up as a role that will be existing for you down the road, and then when you come into budget talks with all of these directors, to understand that there's going to be numbers for local projects and numbers for review of military projects, and how that's going to work, what's going to be needed to make that happen. I just wanted to put a little note right there. Thank you.
Cito Masi, Senator Carlotta. Ladies and gentlemen, I know I have an agenda with me, but to courtesy for our former colleague, I will go ahead and introduce Senator Rory to go ahead and take the podium now. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Madam Speaker, but it's okay. I'll wait my turn. Thank you.
Cito Masi. Then Gipa.
Yeah. Good
You're-
morning,
you're up.
Speaker. Good morning, Senators. I guess there's supposed to be a slide. But if you know me, I like doing things just the way I do it. So the slides are there, but I'm here to talk to you guys and provide you information. So I can do it with or without the slides. It's up to you. Oh, here we
We're
go.
going to, the slides there.
Okay. Okay, first off, I want to introduce to you my deputy, Michelle Lastimosa. It's her official day today. She's not acting, she's totally in, so hi, Michelle.
Good morning.
Okay. There.
Good morning, Speaker.
Good morning.
Senators.
And if you can't tell, I'm extremely happy about this. Okay, sorry. All right, so Guam EPA is one of the only agencies in the government of Guam that actually permits all construction, which includes construction inside the fence, the military projects. So they do have to submit all their permit requirements and meet all our requirements as per every individual on the island. Some of the numbers for like the permit process. In the last 6 months, we've had over 711 permits turned in. For 2018, the total we had 1,552 permits turned in. In 2019, we've already had 1,255 permits, and this is all kinds of permits that Guam EPA sees. Currently, out of those numbers, since 2017, December, only 32 of those are DoD projects. So with the military buildup fastly approaching us in 2021, which is supposed to be the peak, we're looking at possibly, and we're going to get the new numbers in the second week of December. That's when they're going to provide us a new schedule, the updated schedule, what the construction projects are, and their time that they're going to start and the expected closure or finishing time. So with Guam EPA, as you can see, all the permits come in with inspections, enforcement and compliance. If the inspections show that something's wrong, these have to hold up the federal and local mandates. And so again, basically every permit that I mentioned, the number I mentioned, is work that our agency needs to do. And unfortunately for Guam EPA at this point, we are in a state of crisis as far as conducting all our permit reviews, all our site inspections, and if the site inspections show that there's a violation and that would lead to enforcement as well as compliance. So we are barely making it meet now. With the military buildup, we will definitely not make anything, we won't be able to do our job at that point. And I don't think anybody wants us to let the military off easy. So we are in discussion with them about increasing the FTEs at Guam EPA. And as Vera and Carlotta mentioned, I'm working side by side with DOD to figure out how to get funding to Guam. So one of the things that we're talking about is try to follow an established vehicle that gets federal money to the government of Guam agencies. So that's one of the things that we're working on. Next slide, please.
Next slide.
Okay. So I started this slide again and again. I'm sorry, I'm not as organized. I just like talking again. So like again, it takes for a common permit, just like a regular residential build-up permit or construction build, it can take anywhere from 3 to 5 days of review by just one engineer at a time. And so our review goes through at least anywhere from 2 to 10 programs, and each program has its set time to review. So if you look, the 30% increase that DOD has proposed will definitely impact Guam EPA. We've conveyed these sentiments to DOD, and in their supplemental EIS, they too have also acknowledged that Guam EPA, in its height in 2021, would need an additional 16 FTEs. Now, the problem with them identifying 16 FTEs, that's just a general number about people, it's not specifics. Guam EPA is working on the specifics, and I will tell you exactly what positions we're looking at. But that's just a general number. So the thing to be noticed about that is DOD actually acknowledging, yes, the government of Guam will be impacted. I know that other agencies are listed in the supplemental EIS, and they can report out, but for us in the height, that's 16 positions that we could possibly hire just because of the DOD buildup. And those positions are we're looking at program coordinators, lab techs, environmental techs, a professional engineer, inspectors, environmental health specialists, and planners. Now, we submitted something to DOD, and that was per each division. We are currently working with DOD to narrow it down. Some of the positions, like the inspectors, can do inspections for both the air-land division as well as the water division. So some of these positions we can combine for the different divisions. Again, what we're looking at is a matrix of how many FTEs will be based on the number of projects submitted as well as the cost of the projects. Because generally the cost of a project will equal the complexity of the project. So again, I'd like to compare building a house towards building a whole facility that would house 100, 200 people. The complexity is much, much more difficult, and those are things that we're working on. I wish I could give you more specifics as the number, but that will become after the second week of December when we get the updated calendar schedule from DOD. And that will conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leon Guerrero and Ms. Michelle. Next on the agenda, ladies and gentlemen, is Department of Labor. Mr. Dave and Mr. Massey. Again, for the record, please just submit your names and the agency that you're from.
Good morning, Dave Delasola, Director for Department of Labor.
I'm Greg Massey. I'm the Administrator for the Alien Labor Division at Department of Labor.
Good morning, Senators. Thank you for the invite. Appreciate the chance to share some of the information. I think of many departments, a lot of you are familiar with our Alien Labor Division, and I don't need to get into too specifics of the makeup unless you have any questions about it. But we're going very well at the ALPCD. We seem to be moving forward without any additional problems, but they do surface every now and then. And the whole program teeters on a very fine line, and we seem to be going at a smooth ground at this time, barring anything that could happen from the feds or from the Philippine situation. But things are moving smoothly right now, and that I'm happy to report. We currently have close to 2,000 positions applied for, with approvals of 1,663, with boots on the ground of 1,122. So we passed in September the 1,000 mark, which was good. So we haven't passed that since back in 2016. So things are going well. I know that we are still looking for a more permanent solution than the one that we have now, and everybody is, the governor, the admiral, they're all looking at possible other solutions, but nothing is new as far as the last couple of years, and there's nothing new to report. So we're working with what we got, and that is with the NDAA exemption. So with that, I'll just go right into what our needs are.
I know we're not asking questions, but I just wanted a clarification based on the numbers that you're giving, Mr. Dave.
Sure.
It's not DOL employees, this is for the build-up, am I right? Just because you...
What I'm asking for?
No, the H2s.
Oh, yes, those
on
are
the
all
numbers.
H2s.
All H2s.
That are,
Just wanted to
yes.
make sure that the listening audience...
And all these H2s were all came in as part of the NDAA.
That's right.
The National Defense Authorization Act.
Thank you.
So either they're all military or associated with the military.
Thank you.
No problem. So we went bare bones. We know that we estimate at about 1,500 H2s on the ground or arrived is when we're going to start experiencing delays in the processing and in the enforcement side. As you know, we are very aggressive to maintain a clean program, and we go out multiple times and check every badge, make sure that these employees are being treated right, paid right, and are in safe environments and doing the occupation that they are assigned for at the assigned project. And that's what I think we're known for, a very clean program, and we like to maintain it. So as you know, like I said, we have about 1,100 now, but we have 1,600 approved and waiting to arrive. So we've pretty much met and are reaching the critical path of starting to see the delays in the processing. So in the paper, I think it was submitted, our staffing, and I think it's this is just not to run a smooth program, but just to keep up with the pace until our MDF funding stream increases as the H2s come in. There is a delay of the increases, and by the time we get our share of that to help us start funding the necessary staff. And of course, what counts is there's about a 12 to 18 month training period to get these individuals really up to the point where we can start using them effectively in enforcement and in processing. So as Mr. Posna said, the peak is going to be arriving in about 2 to 3 years. And we need at least 1 to 1.5 months for training of an individual in this. So we're at, like I said, we're asking for 2 individuals at ALPCD and 1 individual at the wage and hour to help us with the looking at the wages, making sure that all the H2s and the personnel are being paid right. If there's any wage and hour disputes or filings from both sides, either the civilian American workers or the H2 workers, there is a mix that we are able to properly enforce the increases as these projects start letting out. And they're already starting to come out in very quickly, the pace. So total of 3, 2 in ALPCD, 1 in wage and hour. And we were trying to be very judicious and frugal in our ask. We know that the challenge from the last build-up possibility to this one is how the funding will come in. All parties are aware, and I don't think it's being refuted, but it's just figuring out an avenue for this funding to come in. Seed money, I should say. It's more like a seed money, because after about 1 to 2 years, the MDF funding should kick in, and we should be able to pay for these staff and then additional staff as the MDF grows and the H2s come in. But there's that initial delay period. I think that pretty much says it in a nutshell. I appreciate your time and cooperation. And if you have any questions, I can get into it more deeply at another time, or just submit it to us and we'll be glad to sit down with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dave Diasola. And again, to the listening audience, we'll keep the questions afterwards. You can write all your questions down and we'll send it. And in all fairness to Joint Region, again, we want to make sure that that all the questions will be submitted, and then the answers will be compiled and put up on our database, but also for an opportunity for the island of Guam to know. So again, to the listening audience out there, any questions you have, please do not hesitate to submit them through us via email or send it to our office. Next on the agenda, we have DPW.
Good morning, Speaker and Senators.
Yeah.
I would like to bring up my Chief Engineer from DPW, Masud Tamuri, to present our presentation.
Yes. Do you have a slide, right,
Yes,
Mr. Garcia?
Your staff is preparing it.
Yeah. Please proceed. Just state your name for the record and your position.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Masood Taimuri, Chief Engineer at the Department of Public Works. I'd like to say good morning to everyone. I have a very short presentation, consists of 3 slides. Basically, I wanted to present what DAR funds, which are Defense Access Road funds, are provided for us to date. And then from that point on, we can talk about what is ongoing using similar funds. And also, hopefully, we'll have some future projects that the Department of Defense will be aiding us to provide for this relocation process. Basically, I have a few projects here that I'm going to share with you that have been completed through the Department of Defense funding. One would be the couple of Agania bridges. That work is already completed. The reconstruction of Route 11 from the Port Authority to Route 1 was another project that was performed under DAR, Defense Access Road funds. The Route 1 to Route 8 intersections and signalization improvement was another project that was completed. And Route 1 to Route 3 intersection was also completed. On the ongoing projects, the current projects that are being funded by Department of Defense, we have the Route 3 widening from 2 lanes to 5 lanes, and this begins south of Route 28 to Chalon Carreta. And this is approximately 2.8 miles. There will be some pedestrian path and some bike lanes included. There will be drainage improvements and relocation of some utilities involving this project. And at Chalon Carreta, we will be providing signalization as well. In addition, at Potts Junction, we decided the best way of having that triangular roadway situation into a roundabout, and that roundabout is also included in this current project. Now, on the future projects, Department of Defense has plans for reconstruction of 5 additional bridges along Route 1. And the bridges are on the following rivers: Atantano, Sasa, Lagos, Fonte, and Asan. So these 5 bridges will be practically replaced. Their vehicular load capability will be increased. In addition, their hydraulic capacity will also be enhanced. The other aspect of this future DAR-funded project involves utility hardening. As you may know, most of our roadways and bridges are only able to handle roughly about 80,000 pounds of vehicular load. As military is anticipating loads in excess of 200,000 pounds, utility hardening will be required, which would in turn protect our roadways as well as underground utilities such as water lines and wastewater lines and so on. So from Route 1, Navy, to Route 3, the exterior right-hand side lanes only will be hardened so that the traffic of the heavy trucks will be not impacting these underground utilities and our pavements and so on. So this is going to go up to Route 9. That's from Route 3 to Route 9. And that's about where the location of the new Marine base will end. Basically, the hardening will involve 30 miles on each right-hand side lane of the length of the highway I just mentioned in both directions. That's pretty much what we have on our plate for completed, current, and future DAR-funded projects. And I want to thank you, and if there are any questions, we can answer later.
Thank you. Senator Carlotta, added information.
Yes, what I would like to add to the presentation you just heard is, what you just heard is an explanation of the degree of DoD projects. There has been no problem at all with DoD funding hard infrastructure projects. The problem that we are now all experiencing is the staffing needs of the government of Guam in regulatory compliance and monitoring. Our regulatory shields is what we want to strengthen right now. The governor feels this is an obligation of the federal government in order for us to keep up with what their needs are. So when we go to DOD, the process that we're at is the government of Guam is going to have to say, we can't fund that. And when the government of Guam says they can't fund that, then the Department of Defense is going to go to every one of their head agencies. They're going to go to Health and Human Services, they're going to go to Highway, and they're going to say, oh, they have needs, push funds down. So that's one of the processes that we're going to be engaged in. We also feel that we should prepare separate language to get into an NDA appropriation act or some other act. So we're preparing multiple fronts, but the problem that we're having is not that DOD doesn't pay for stuff. This is proof they pay for infrastructure. It's where the thing gets a little, where what we're experiencing is the government of Guam's regulatory capacity needs are what we're going to be aggressively pushing for. Thank you.
Sidus Masi, Senator Leon Guerrero. Next on the agenda is Public Health and Social Services. Ms. Linda?
Yes, thank you. I also would like to introduce Tom Nadeau, the Chief of the Division of Public Health. So he's here with me. Should you have any questions at the end? Manana Sizuz, good morning. The Division of Public Health has 5 major divisions, the department, and within that, the Division of Environmental Health is a very crucial department because it provides all the environmental health services to the people of Guam to protect the public from certain hazards of the environment. And one of the major functions of Division of Environmental Health is ensuring health-regulated establishments are operating in a sanitary manner to prevent, of course, disease transmissions from occurring. And such establishments in this particular case is the temporary workforce housing, which is crucial to the environmental buildup. I have no idea if the slideshow is on, but I'm just going to go verbatim down. In regards to the temporary work housing facilities, they provide short-term lodging to the temporary workers, such as the H-2B foreign workers. And our Division of Environmental Health inspects all these workforce housing units to protect and, of course, promote the health and safety of these occupants in these facilities and those that may reside in the immediate vicinity of such establishments. In regulating the temporary worker housing, our environmental health, public health inspectors inspect the sanitary condition, and also other facilities have an established standards for the conditions of these living areas, such as plumbing and all the sleeping quarters, toilet facilities, water, sewer disposal, and lighting and vector control. And in line with that, we are anticipating that subsequently we're going to conduct inspections, and we anticipate that permits and all this to operate, there will be 114 temporary working housing permits that we may need to inspect, and some of these may not be occupied. So one inspector is assigned for the program to inspect, and their ability to inspect requires that they inspect all this at a scheduled time. However, there may be additional increase in the number of temporary work housing units as expected from the military buildup, which will require additional inspectors to conduct the timely compliance of inspections. And as determined, as you can see on the PowerPoint, there'll be for every 1,000 workers or occupants in this facility, we need 1 inspector. Right now, if you go to the next slide, please. We're also anticipating that during this time, when we have H-2B workers coming into Guam, they are coming from areas that are endemic to a lot of diseases. As you know, Guam is still going through the dengue outbreak, and they may also come from these areas that are already endemic to dengue. And it's happening all over the Pacific. So we're also concerned about that, and we're concerned about the establishment of these mosquito-borne diseases. And so we're incorporating in our entire staffing, as you can see on the PowerPoint presentation, with an anticipation of about 14,078 workers, to be exact, 1 inspector for every 1,000. That is anticipated in the year 2022. Thus, we're going to need about 14 staff, and of that 14, 12 will be inspectors and 2 will be supervisors. And of those 12 inspectors, That will cost $527,160, and the 2 inspectors will cost $131,405. So if you add that all together, that's $658,565 for the inspection. And as I alluded earlier, there's going to be a need for the medical entomologist, and that's going to be about $140,000 for that position. And if you add up all these positions together, the total cost recruitment will be $798,565. And of course, when we reach the steady state by 2027, the number of inspectors will decrease. And so the funding, as you know, will also decrease. So our total funding for just the public health inspectors will be $219,650, and for the supervisors of the environmental health, it will be $65,703. So if you combine those two together, it will be $285,353 that we're requesting for the total inspectors, and that is inclusive of the supervisors of that branch. In terms of the medical entomologists, as I indicated, it'll be $140,000, so adding all that together would be $425,353. Now, the recruitment of these positions are only applicable to just the salaries. We did not include the fringe benefits, nor did we include any equipment, supplies, and training at this particular case. Our other concern, next slide please, is that the recruitment of these individuals really requires that we have to recruit those interested and qualified applicants, and not only just recruiting them, but also retaining them. And of course, we need to really do all this by instituting a very competitive salary. That's the key. So we need to improve our recruitment process and, of course, provide the incentive for perhaps an above-step recruitment in order to obtain a pool of qualified applicants. That's it. Thank you.
Since Masi, Linda, and Tom. Senator Rory Respicio, Port Authority of Guam.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker and members of the legislature. I'd like to also introduce Dominic Muña, who's the Deputy General Manager for Operations, and Joe Abeliana, who is the Chief Chief Planning Officer at the Port Authority of Guam. We do have a slide presentation. And so we've been asked by the Guam Buildup Office to present to the legislature what the military buildup effect on cargo would be at the port. In addition to the ongoing port modernization programs that are on full implementation, we recognize that currently 30% of all cargo comes in through the port. And through the height of the military buildup, we're going to see a double in military construction additional equipment, supplies, and military construction materials all related to the port. So this will present potentially double the current capacity that we have now. The buildup is expected to impact the port in 3 ways. One, DoD contractors will import substantial volumes of materials and supplies, thus affecting the amount of containerized bulk break bulk and liquid bulk cargo. Additional DoD personnel and dependents will increase the flow of household goods, personnel vehicles, and goods sold at the commissaries and local businesses, primarily impacting containerized cargo with some impacts to break bulk and liquid bulk. The realignment will require additional workers from off island, both during and after construction, furthering these impacts. And so this table that we present are from fiscal years 2018 with a projection all the way up to 2027. Next slide, please. So currently, the challenges facing the Port Authority of Guam as a result of the buildup, we recognize that we have 3 gantry cranes, and the lifespan of those port gantry cranes are actually 9 years less than what was reported to the Public Utilities Commission. And so when they did their independent assessment, that was their conclusion. And so by 2026, all of the 3 gantry cranes we're looking to replace them, beginning with gantry 3. Hopefully by this time next year, we would start the procurement process for that. It's a result of the port's harsh corrosive environment coupled with the sulfur-laden fumes from the adjacent GPA power plant, which shorten the lifespan of these gantry cranes and thus warrants an aggressive and periodically executed preventative maintenance plan. and it's critical that the gantry cranes be replaced as soon as possible to ensure the port can maintain its operational sustainability and mission capabilities in support of the military buildup. So the mitigation for this initiative, Madam Speaker and members of the legislature, is that the port recently submitted a grant application to the U.S. Department of Transportation Merit Port Infrastructure Development Program in the amount of $30 million to purchase 2 brand new STS gantry cranes, and the successful acquisition of the gantry cranes will ensure that the port continues to meet the needs of Guam and Micronesian region, as well as properly service the military buildup and future mission capabilities. And so what we've done at the Port Authority in working very closely with the Guam Buildup Office, with Mr. Pashnia, with Senator Leon Guerrero, with the governor, lieutenant governor as well, we're recognizing that the need to replace out these 2 gantry cranes are mitigation type initiatives, that it would be a big opportunity for DOD to determine its commitment to ensuring that the Port Authority of Guam is not a choke point for all these goods coming into the island. And so even recently when the Lieutenant Governor met with the DOD officials, as well as the governor meeting with all these military officials, recognizing Mr. Gary Corbara's work in this area as well, this initiative is being socialized as part of mitigation type military buildup need. And so we're doing that in conjunction with the need to have the port sustained operations for local and regional commerce. And so with the 3rd gantry crane, because this grant that we submitted requires an up to 20% matching grant, so in order to increase our competition for this, we said that if they purchase 2 cranes, we'll purchase 1 crane. And the way we're going to do that is to a loan with the USDA. And then to ensure that these long-term operational sustainability, the port has also established a port improvement program inclusive of capital improvements, equipment replacement, and ongoing port maintenance projects. Next slide. Another area that we recognize because of the increase in throughput at the port will also be the increased staffing levels that are required. This is going to be a challenge government-wide, and the challenge remains is we cannot ramp up our port operations to the point where post-build-up it will not be sustainable. This has been a discussion that we've been having for years, both in the legislative and executive branch throughout the years. And so the way to deal with this at the port is on the August 27th board meeting, we had asked the board of directors to give us authorization to issue request proposal for temporary staffing. And so what this would do is we would be able to bring back those retired Port Authority employees who have all the experience, for example, the crane operators and the maintenance folks. And so because it would be done through a temporary staffing agency, they would be able to come back, of course, at a very reduced salary level, maybe step 1 of what that position offered, and that the employee, if they're a GovGuam retiree, they would not have to suspend their retirement annuity to come and work at the port if we have this arrangement set up. The other thing is the port will not be responsible to pay for their benefits, and once the work is no longer there, then those services will no longer be needed. So we wouldn't be on the hook to maintain staffing at that level. And that will take care of our maintenance division, operations division, and also the peak military buildup impact. So that, in summary, is what the port's doing, what the legislature can do to assist the governor, lieutenant governor, the administration, and to fully prepare for the buildup. Thank you.
GPA's not here. Department of Land Management, Mr. Joe Borja. Please state your name for the record and where you're from.
Joseph M. Borja, Director, the Department of Land Management. The Department of Land Management is impacted by the military buildup in its planning division and in the Guam Land Use Commission, and will send tsunamis to the Department of Public Works, the Department of Public Health, and the Department of Labor. The need for temporary workers' housing facilities due to military buildup construction projects and its ripple effect on small-scale but numerous and varied developments in the immediate area requires an increased demand of services from the severely understaffed and fragile planning division at Land Management. The Department of Land Management provides experienced planners, administrative and ministerial services to the Guam Land Use Commission. The planners are charged with accepting rezoning applications, reviewing them, processing them, and making recommendations to the GLUC Board of Commissioners who have the rezoning powers. Let me address the temporary workers housing facilities needs. Temporary workers housing facilities, previously known as workers' barracks, are only allowed on lands zone M1, somewhat rare land in present-day Guam, hence numerous requests to rezone other lands into M1. The review and processing of these complex rezoning applications by the planners is detailed and tedious. The processing time of these rezoning applications can take up to 2 years from submittal of the application to a commission decision. It requires the detailed review and recommendations of many other Government of Guam regulatory, licensing, and infrastructure agencies through the submission of technical position statements. Applications such as these are required by statute to provide timely and complete public notices for its public hearings, municipal hearings, and GLUC meetings. The impact on land management from the buildup is early. The department is in the front lines, and the impact is hard, all at once in the buildup, affected timing of these construction projects and processes. DLM, through the Guam Land Use Commission to date, has approved land use applications for 20,827 temporary workers housing units. These facilities have to be building permitted by DPW, health inspected by the Department of Public Health and Social Services, and certified by the Department of Labor. From this DLM and GLUC approved action, a tsunami then hits the Department of Public Works and will be chronic. It will be specially detailed with much face-to-face time during the permitting application process and the construction process. Because of the increased permitting process for these temporary workers housing facilities, DPW will need to hire at least an in-house engineer, additional permit processors, and additional building inspectors. Another tsunami from this Land Management and Land Use Commission action will hit the Department of Public Health and Social Services. They would have to hire additional health inspectors to process applications and conduct health inspections of the sanitary conditions of a potentially 20,827 temporary workers housing units. Land Management is also dealing with an onslaught of land use applications for numerous small-scale developments in the areas immediately surrounding the largest temporary workers housing facility, the Guam Regional Medical Center facility, and the proposed marine cantonment area. The department has severe understaffing of the planning division. Its capacity and retention of employees is critical. The planning division of the Department of Land Management ideally operates with 21 approved positions, but the division presently has 14 vacancies. Only 7 positions are funded and filled. Of the 7 positions, 4 are planners, 3 senior planners, 1 junior planner. In addition, the situation is further exacerbated by the recent retirement and subsequent rehire by a private consultant to the military of the chief planner. Of the 3 senior planners remaining, 2 are beyond retirement age and service and have indicated a willingness to retire sometime in the next 18 months. The junior planner is a planner 2. Out of the 7 filled positions, 4 are eligible for retirement. We do not want the retirement of senior planners at the peak of the buildup. DLM needs and should endeavor to hire 2 planners immediately to give time to build capacity. 2 planners with software and equipment cost approximately $125,000 per annum. The one-stop responsibilities of the Department of Land Management's Planning Division requires that a land management planner be stationed in the DPW One-Stop Center for permit and business license application clearance. The Department of Land Management has not been able to fill that mandate. Land Management is presently only staffing the One-Stop Center on Tuesdays and Wednesdays because of the planner shortage. With the hiring of Planner 2s, Land Management hopes to be present 5 days a week, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. As you can see, Madam Speaker and Senators, the Department of Land Management is already being impacted by the buildup in the sense that it has processed numerous applications since 2009 to approve potentially 20,897 temporary housing unit, and that has a ripple effect to the Department of Public Health, the Department of Public Works, and the Department of Labor. Thank you. I'm open for questions.
Si Diyos Masi, Mr. Borja. Anybody here from BSP? If not, Mr. Lohan? Department of Parks and Recs, SHPO, Discipline?
All right, good morning, Senators. I'd like to actually applaud our fine ladies, Ms. Vera and Ms. Carlotta, for all the work they're doing. It's an enviable task to gather all the agencies together and put it into one program to work with the Department of Defense on this. I also like to recognize Mr. Joe Borja on his briefcase. I think it's eligible for the as a national artifact, so thank you for bringing in your briefcase, sir.
So go ahead and state your name for the record.
Okay, I have slides as well, so if we can pop those up, that'll be good. All right, so...
Mr. Go ahead and state your name for the record.
Oh, Patrick Lujan, State Historic Preservation Officer. Thank you very much. So some current activities within the office. We're finalizing a new mid-programmatic agreement with the Navy. That is not considered the Guam build-up programmatic agreement, but it is connected with the build-up with the Marines coming. So as a matter of fact, that should be, it's basically an intern programmatic agreement while a new form of it is being finalized, and we're hoping by March we'll have a really good programmatic agreement regarding the Navy's training and testing programs. We're also formalizing a stipulation 13 invocation for the live firing range project. That one is directly related to the 2011 programmatic agreement, which we know as the Guam Build-Up Agreement. So we're formalizing that. Outside of the Guam Build-Up, we're working with Department of Land Management, Mr. Borja and his team, for the design phase of the NAFTA Maninata. That's long overdue. I think that's of great interest for the Guam legislature because the next phase would be the funding part of actually building that ancient remains memorial. And then within the office, we're still trying to develop the archaeological guidelines. And of course, like everybody else, it's recruit and retain experienced workforce. I think every agency has their unique challenges regarding the Guam buildup. With us, it's ongoing. I think our peak is right now, as opposed to in a couple of years. And so we're hot and heavy for the Guam buildup projects because it's the actual buildup. Once they start going vertical, then it's less of our worries and it'll be another agency's worries. But right now on the horizontal side, then that's where we're really looking into the projects. Next slide. So the challenges that we have, like you've heard this morning, we are short-staffed right now by 7 to properly review in a timely manner. We only have one archaeologist on staff, that's the state archaeologist. About 70% of our activities are DoD related. So most of our time within the office is looking at DoD projects. We do not have GIS personnel, so our state archaeologist does that, takes time away from him. We have IT connectivity complications. Maybe the good Senator Castro coming from OTEC, he can step in and help us with that as well. Staff development, we have a real difference of those who are just about to retire as opposed to the new ones that are coming in after Senor Garrido and Malia. The next one with experience only has 4 years in the office, so we have that big gap. And with Senor Garrido and Malia Ramirez, looking at within the next 12 to 24 hours or 24 months of retirement, we have that gap of institutional knowledge that we'll be losing. So we're trying to capture all of that stuff before they head out. And then also with exterior stakeholders, with their Section 106 training, we're trying to find funding for that. So, and we're talking about all the other agencies that receive federal funding. Those are all required to go through Section 106 undertakings. And we see a lot of things that, that the staff of these agencies are not familiar with the process that would require these types of trainings. Next slide. So recently there was a internal organizational audit, and it came out that we would need the following: another qualified archaeologist with the standards of the Office of the Interior, Department of Interior, a GIS specialist, a computer data librarian, which is being undertaken by admin aide as we speak, another planner, 2 HP specialists, which would allow us to be more proactive in the compliance and inspections of the sites. Right now, we're very reactive with the shortage of manpower that we have. We wait until a complaint comes in before we go out and take a look. So we want to take a more proactive stance, not only on the military side, but also on the civilian side. And then a historic architect, that is one of the National Park Service positions that has never been filled on Guam, but with the times hitting 2020, we're looking at more buildings dating back to the 1950s, 1960s that were going to have more historic value, and a historic architect is going to be needed for the office as well. With that said, with the new programmatic agreement coming up, I know Senator Chalahi will be holding another hearing on December 10th here, specifically for the new MIT PA, so you guys are more than welcome to partake in that. Thank you.
Situ Asmasi, Mr. Lahan. Department of Agriculture, Ms. Chelsea.
Hafiday Speaker Muña Barnes and Senators. The Department of Agriculture also has a slide, if that's there.
You want to go ahead and state your name for the record? I apologize.
My name is Chelsea Muña-Breck, Director of Department of Agriculture. We have 5 specific divisions in addition to a law enforcement section, each of which will require additional personnel to help support public build-up related activities outside of the fence. Starting with our Agriculture Development Services, this is one of the divisions that primarily reviews permits, which include permits for clearing and grading and wetland inspections, as well as rezoning. We currently have 1 individual reviewing all of the permits that come through the department in this specific section. Needless to say that he will need additional support, even going through the permits that he has right now, but most of which will be related to build-up activities outside of the fence, to include residential and commercial developments. So we anticipate that for 2020 and 2021, we will need 4 agriculturalists. And as the buildup slows down, that can be decreased steadily to around 2. For our biosecurity division, we will need commodity inspection officers who inspect all of the commodities that come through the airport and customs and quarantine. Right now, we have 3 commodity inspection officers, well, 2 and 1 supervisor. We will need an addition of 3 inspection officers. We will need biosecurity agricultural technicians to address invasive species issues. They are the ones who go out into the field to respond to any reports of identified invasive species, so we will require 3 additional personnel. A second component of our permit process is our Division of Aquatic and Wildlife Resources biologists. Permits that go through the department start first with our agricultural development services and then are transmitted to our biologists who will conduct biological assessments or biological assessment reviews. And they're looking for endangered or listed species that are both federally or locally listed, as well as assessing impacts to the oceans and coastal zones. We will need 3 additional biologists for this process right now. I want to express that when the biologist conducts reviews of the assessments or surveys that come through the office, they also have to do field inspections. So it's not just a matter of reviewing a write-up submitted by a construction or contractor or construction company or contractor, but they also have to go and do a site inspection. And when they do these inspections, they have to divide the areas into transects and then also survey at all times of the day, sometimes in the middle of the night from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m., depending on what listed or endangered species they're assessing for. So it's not just a matter of reviewing material, but it requires significant labor hours spent in the field trying to protect Guam's resources. We will also require conservation officers who conduct inspections and investigations for marine preserve monitoring. They also do work with security forces on base for poaching. They assist with hunter education and then also provide a federally supported joint enforcement agreements with NOAA for marine activity. We will require 5 additional officers for that. Our animal control and animal health division will see a substantial increase, I'm presuming, in animal permits and registrations as contractors, military personnel are bringing their loved pets into island with them, and also those that will be departing the island, depending on how long different contractors or military personnel stay. We will require 2 additional officers as well as 2 additional clerks. And last but not least is our forestry division, which will require forestry aides and foresters. We will see an increase in urban and community forestry, as well as a review of forestry health issues and invasive species issues tied to forest health with the increased buildup activity, and land use reviews for permits, depending on where they're located. We anticipate the need for 4 foresters and 4 forestry aides. Now, I want to qualify all of this by saying the department, as you well know, for the last 2 decades has been gutted and undermanned historically. So we're treading water right now with the personnel that we do have and doing the best that we can to support our island and protect our natural resources. But with the increase in activity, it's paramount that we see an increase in personnel as well in order to continue the ability to protect our island as is needed. Thank you.
Ms. Chelsa, I want to take the time to thank all the agency heads for being here. I will note for the record and work closely with the administration again to say that the Guam Water Works Authority, the Guam Power Authority, and the Bureau of Statistics and Plans, we're hoping that they could present to us, and we'll work a date out if not tomorrow. We will be here tomorrow again, colleagues and ladies and gentlemen, November 22nd, 2019 at 8:30 in the morning. Before I close, I'd also like to acknowledge the fact that in the audience, Chief of Staff Tony Babauta is here on behalf of the governor also. Thank you so much for being here during the presentation. As noted earlier, I wanted to make sure, because of the different agencies and the all the topics that we were talking about, any questions that anybody has, please submit them, write them down, submit it. Our email is speaker@guamlegislature.org, or you can hand deliver it to our office at 163 Chalan Santo Papa, Hagatnya, Guam. I want to thank all of you for coming. I will call this public hearing up. I'm going to go ahead, not open for questions, but for comments to my colleagues. I do apologize for that. Vice Chair Senator Marsh Taitino, I will recognize you for a comment.
Sainama Asi, Madam Speaker, and thank you all, Situas Masi, for coming here today. I know that what we're looking at today is just a small bit of the work and effort that you've put into trying to think this through. It's a complicated calculation, as you've made abundantly clear. And so I want to say that I appreciate the breakdown by public health and the other agencies that help us understand the number of positions needed and the associated costs, looking at things like recruitment, training, equipment, and other costs that may not be readily apparent to us, but indeed need to be part of that calculation. And we need to make sure that the federal government is aware of and that we are pressing them to support all of those costs, because they do cost us as a community as a whole. It's important to hear and have our government agencies think about the impacts, not only during the build-up construction, but as the Port Authority said, after. There are going to be continuing impacts to our community by increased people, increased workers, increased situations, and I just encourage all of you, you've done wonderful work so far, but I encourage you to think as complexly, and that's not a real word, I realize that, but in as complex a way as possible in these calculations, because they're for our community and they help us make sure that our needs are being met as much as possible through all of these times. And I would have to say the federal government, they need to hear it from us. They need to understand it. They're not going to be understanding it without our input. It seems like there are more than 127 positions that were, well, I guess maybe I didn't do my quick calculation correct, but it seems like there may be more than 127 positions as we move forward and we start to think about these things in that more complex manner. And so I hope that there's going to be an opportunity to increase that number because it needs to be what's a real impact for us. So I'm really appreciative and I strongly support all of these efforts that are going forward to safeguard our community, to make sure that we are protected and our needs are not compromised to the best of our ability. I completely agree with the governor in that these are a federal responsibility. We as a community have absorbed a lot. We are incredibly supportive, but there are breaking points. There are points where already our agencies, one after the other, are already mentioning we are in crisis management pretty much across the board, it feels like. We're barely meeting our ability to process permits, carry out inspections, and so forth as it is. We need to continue, even with our $50 million budget, well, let me restate that. Our budget that's $50 million less than it was 2 years ago. We need to continue to figure out how we can resolve these, but again, to have the federal government, if it wants to support its own actions and make sure that they're successful, they need to take responsibility for those actions. there was an issue that was brought up by at least one agency, and it's absolutely no fault to those who accept the work of working for the federal government. When it comes down to it, there's nobody I want working for the federal government or the military more than our community members. They know our land, they know our community, and so they're in many ways the best equipped to work for the military in our landscape. But at the same time, the hard reality is they are draining our capacity. In several agencies, I know people who worked really hard for our community. And again, I would not want anybody other than them working inside the fence, outside the fence for our community, but it doesn't change the fact that our agency lost those people. And so we need to, as leaders here, the administration, like all across the board, we need to figure out how we can deal with that. That shared capacity is what it's turning out to be, but it's draining our agencies. How can we recruit? How can we train? How can we make sure that we're getting them into our offices so that we're not so understaffed that we're overwhelmed and can't keep up with the workload? So, I mean, that boils down to, again, thanking you for the work that you're doing because it needs to be done. And I encourage those, as I said, to be as complex as possible in figuring out those impacts because they hit us in so many ways, to go beyond the frugal ask. My hunch is that whatever we ask for, it will be accommodated to a degree, but there's a good chance it won't be 100%. So we need to make sure that we have made as strong a case as possible for all of our needs so that as much as possible is being able to be met by the federal government. I'm hopeful that they will step up to the plate, but I encourage you, please go beyond the frugal, go into the real in as complex a manner as possible. This is incredibly complex. I really appreciate that the speaker brought this forward because it's so important for our community to hear that you're working on our behalf of all of those details that are involved and what we're trying to do on their behalf to just make sure that we can continue to function and not compromise our community's needs. So, Sainam Asi, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Chair. Committee on Rules, Chair, do you have a comment?
Sujus Masi, Madam Speaker, and Sujus Masi to all the stakeholders for this update, Senator Carlotta and Vera and all of the agency leaders who presented it to us this morning. I really appreciate the time that you have taken to gather all this information together and present it, not just to this informational briefing, but also to the community, whoever might be watching. I think I have a lot of questions, so I'll be sending them to the speaker, but I just want to get a better sense of the overall plan, the overall timeline, and again, like my colleague had mentioned, the cost for these over 100 FTEs that we'll be needing, but just the overall plan. I think it would be really great for us to kind of get into a deep dive on that. But again, I just want to reiterate that failure to plan is a plan to fail, and we don't have a choice but to be on top of this. So we certainly stand ready to assist you in whatever way that we can to help to address some of the concerns that were brought up today. And if there's anything else that we can do, please don't hesitate to let us know. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Committee on Rules Chair. Minority Leader, Senator Will, you're recognized.
Thank you,
for
Madam
comments.
Speaker. I appreciate it. Thank you all for your time, Ms. Sugg and everyone else who's part of the panel. Pat, it's great to see you. I appreciate your thoughts, your contribution to this concept of being proactive. I know before I was elected, someone in the government had the foresight to put forward this philosophy of a one Guam approach. And having since served both at the cabinet and now at the legislative levels, I really strive, Madam Speaker, to contribute some of that energy in that spirit. With that said, I'll forward my questions to you, Madam Speaker, but I want to put it on the table. Senator Carlotta, some of the issues that we had discussed in the CMTF years ago are still on the table for me. For example, I believe that if we're going to overcome some of the issues associated with the economy, we're seeing on one hand that the economy is either flat or could possibly contract, but on the other hand, we're seeing a lot of promise in terms of the military buildup and the investments in the economy. And so I want to see if we can build synergy and partner to be proactive. The three things, Madam Speaker, I would like us to consider as a body, and not only will I send my questions and concerns to you, I'll copy the respective chairs. For example, when we look at the system of education, all-inclusive of Department of Defense education systems, I'd like to see how much is being spent there, and if there's an opportunity, perhaps, maybe not to bring the two systems back together just yet, but are there areas that we can share in terms of perhaps transportation, to look at the per pupil costs and have that discussion at a subcommittee level, so we don't have to take everyone else's time who have different interests. The second issue that I had committed to early on, Ms. Sagan, at the beginning of this term, was this issue to access for fishing rights over here in the northern part of the island. I just want to state for the record that the military did say in a forum much like this one that they would commit to contributing resources for some kind of real-time notification system, and so I'll be asking a follow-up to that. I know that could be also raised at another forum designed for the Department of Defense or federal side of the House, but this is something that we should be looking at and following up on. The third issue would be on issues of reporting and local mandates. I know former Senator Respicio was here, and he authored that one particular bill that became law for the tracking and reporting of the importation of produce. This fell both on BSP and now it falls on Department of Agriculture. And so at the time, it was an unfunded mandate, and I certainly hope that we can work with the administration. The Chief of Staff is here. He's shown nothing but good faith, and hopefully we can fulfill at least the spirit of that law as proffered by Senator Respicio. The last one too, again, back to Pat's point in terms of being proactive, is the need to share information. I know that one of my colleagues here on the panel is just as bullish about the need to utilize technology so we can be much more effective and efficient. For example, the use of land app data like GIS layers, as you were kind of referring to, Pat, earlier. And there was a move in the prior administration, and I know it's supported by the incumbent governor and her senior team, to see if we can float that Guam Land mobile app again at no cost to the people in terms of access. And so I'll leave those 3 or 4 thoughts on the table. But again, I'd like to reiterate that I think this buildup, if it's going to be a win-win, is going to require a lot more synergy and partnership for the people of Guam if we're to all mutually prosper. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Minority Leader Senator Castro. Senator Moylan, for your comment.
Just like to say thank you to the panel, and I'm looking forward to the next meeting. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. With that being said, we will come back tomorrow, November 22nd, 2019, in this public hearing room at 8:30 in the morning. Undunkul and Asitus Maasi for all of you being here, and I hope to see you folks again tomorrow. Thank you. We are in recess, 9:15.